So, we've got a great guest coming out in a moment, and you may have heard of him, and you'll definitely seen his work. And I won't rub it on much longer because we've got loads to talk about. Mike Quinn.
Thank you so much. This is me here.
This is you there.
Excellent. Check. Can you all hear me? Is that working?
Oh, there we are now.
There you go.
Fantastic. It's something to do with the tech, I guess, you know. Anyway, thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Yay! All right, I guess I'll sit down now.
So, how's life treating you?
Oh, amazing. My goodness me, here I am all these years later.
Who'd have thunk it?
How lucky am I, though, to be here with you all and to still be enjoying the conventions and the people. And
You've had loads of busy periods in your career. In fact, it's pretty much been busy all the way. So, was there ever a moment when you thought, I can't envisage still doing this in 2020?
yeah, you can't see that far ahead. I mean, I don't know about you, but even just thinking 5 years ahead from now, you can't visualize that, right? I mean, it's just so hard to perceive that. So, you know, we try to live in the moment, I suppose, as much as we can, and enjoy what we have right now. But yeah, we plan for the future, but of course, you know, you can only plan so much.
Exactly.
Which is great. I love that now. I love that life, you know, will bring us all kinds of surprises that we can't expect, you know, new friends, you know, that's partly what these shows are all about.
Absolutely.
Like seeing old friends and making new ones. It's great, isn't it, though? That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. So let's take it all the way back to the beginning. How did your involvement with the industry, how did it start?
Oh my goodness, well, the industry, my sister was in the business. She's 2 years older than me, so when I was a kid, she was acting on stage and doing singing. She was at the London Palladium in a pantomime, and so she worked with, she did about 3 or 4 pantomimes as a kid, with Mike and Bernie Winters and Edward Woodward and all those guys. So I was around all that stuff. And then for a while she had a ventriloquist act as well. So I used to play with when nobody was looking, sneak in and play with the ventriloquist dummy head. And it was like an early animatronic, you know, it had like blinks and ear wiggles and eyebrows that could go up and down and it could wink. So I was like secretly playing with that. But I had a puppet show, a glove puppet show when I was about 8 years old, and a magic act. I was rubbish, I was really bad. So I'd do auditions and would fail miserably for the BBC and goodness knows what. But that's kind of how it started for me. But I love puppets, and I love cartoons and animation. And I used to draw a lot of Disney characters and cartoons. And so when Muppets came along, Muppet Show in particular, they were like real life cartoons. It was everything in one, animation and puppetry all in one thing. So I became obsessed, and that's I never got over it.
You mentioned the Muppets, obviously classic characters, but
Yeah.
it does strike me that you mentioned, you know, puppeteering and all the other elements that you were into, and the Muppets feel like live-action cartoons.
Yeah.
They were so different, weren't they?
They were totally unique, and just became obsessed. Like, how do these things work, and how are they built, and what's going on here? I'm talking about 1976, really.
Yeah.
So before all of you were born.
So when you came to be involved with working on the Muppets, that must have been like a dream come true.
But yeah, it was insane, really. I mean, I sort of hung around Muppet Show a lot. I used to visit the studio at L Street while I was still at school and ride my way into the studio through security. Can't do that now. I mean, I don't know why not. But, yeah, and they got to know me, basically. So when I left school, I asked Jim Henson for a job. And he basically said, well, he's here all the time anyway, I might as well give him a job. And that was Jim, you know. He saw something in people, I guess.
He definitely did, and I was going to say, there's a documentary recently about Jim and his life and career and such, and he'd seemed such a, not magical, maybe not over-egging it, but such an astute guy and an observer of people and things.
Yeah, he had a special ability to sort of see what people had in them, and he had a way of bringing out the best of people as well. It was just this natural ability. I've not really met anyone like him since. I imagine, I mean, to me, I think there are a few sort of great creatives that have really changed entertainment, and of course Walt Disney would be one of them, Jim Henson, and even George Lucas. There's a handful though that are just so individual and unique and affected my life.
Yeah.
So, for sure.
Yeah. And what do you think it was that he saw in you specifically? Because there must have been a lot of guys that wanted
Took
to
pity on me, I think. Like tenacity. This guy's got no hope. He might as well do puppets. I don't know. Maybe he just, I think he saw that I was really enthusiastic and he knew that puppetry was what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And at that time, there was nowhere to learn how to do that stuff either. You know, he was the pioneer.
Yeah.
So I guess, I don't know, I guess he just saw that, I think they tried me out for about a week at the beginning and then they just kept me on, you know.
Yeah.
So they had an out if that didn't work out. But I was 16 at the time, so.
So it's a good age to be, I guess you've got to be a sponge, haven't you? You've got to soak
Yeah, well, you know, at that age, your brain is still being wired up and things. So in a way, it's great. You know, I didn't have any bad habits either. So they could teach me and train me in the ways of the Muppets.
And which characters were you, when you got into, I mean, obviously you work your way in, but when you got into it, what sort of characters were you getting involved with?
All of them, basically. I mean, I would assist Jim and Frank with Kermit and Piggy and Fozzie Bear, but also I would double up in the crowd scenes. Each of the main puppeteers had 5 or 6 principal characters, and they could only do one at a time.
Yeah.
So if Jim had Kermit, then I would do Ralph, for example, which was also a Jim character. So that's kind of how it worked. Or you do chickens and rats and pigs, you know, as well, singing vegetables, all the good stuff.
So I suppose if you've got Jim, let's say, doing Ralph,
yeah,
you've got to really watch what he's doing with Ralph, because us as laymen watching it, just being entertained, don't know the difference.
You have to be a mimic, yeah, that's for sure. I remember us doing it was early 80s, we did a bunch of Polaroid commercials for the States with all the Muppets. And I guess Frank was doing Miss Piggy and I was doing Kermit in this group shot. And then when they went to do the close-ups, Frank had to study what I'd done with Fozzie to copy what I was doing. And he was like, oh, that's quite good. He's like, oh, he's doing an internal move there. That's quite good. So I think he was quite impressed. But you have to be a mimic, definitely, mimic the styles.
Yeah.
Each puppeteer has their own style and timing. So that helps. So I used to do impersonations when I was a kid as well. So I was already in that mindset.
Was it as a result of that the Star Wars gig came about?
So yeah, kind of indirectly really. Before I started with Muppets, I was a big fan of Yoda in Empire Strikes Back. I just loved that character and what Frank had done with it. He was kind of the first animatronic puppet character in a film, really. So I loved that anyway. And of course, Jim Henson and George Lucas had a good relationship with each other already. So we had worked on I started on the Great Muppet Caper, and then we went straight into The Dark Crystal, which was the first animatronic film ever. And so we learned how to do creatures and how to make realistic characters walk and how do they blink and you know what make they're not Muppety. We didn't do Muppets anymore. So we learned how to do that on Dark Crystal. And then of course the next film that came along in the studio was Return of the Jedi at Elstree. So basically, they interviewed a few of us puppeteers. I had a 10-minute chat with Robert Watts in his office, and no audition. I didn't know what characters they wanted me to do, but I was hired from the beginning of the film, kind of right throughout, just to go from character to character. So we were ready for Lucasfilm to use on their creatures, really. So they got lucky, I think. That's kind of how it came about. Really, right place at the right time. It was what they call lightning in a bottle, I suppose, at that time. It was a magical time for sure.
And given that you've got these 2 creature shops essentially, with guys that were collaborators and friends, was there overlap? With, obviously, staffing-wise, it felt like there was no overlap, but was there any other?
Not so much, really. I mean, you had this sort of the Frank Oz side of things and Wendy Froud stuff with Yoda, for sure, and that went through to Return of the Jedi. And then you had Dave Barkley, of course, who worked on Empire and Jedi and Dark Crystal. Yeah. So there was that. And then I was puppeteers, Tim Rose and myself. Yeah. And that was kind of it, really, I think. Otherwise, it was the Star Wars Lucasfilm creature side was more ILM in Los Angeles, or in San Francisco. Yeah. So, they were kind of slightly separate. And in many ways, the Return of the Jedi creatures were a lot more, less advanced, I suppose, than what we'd just done on Dark Crystal. They were heavier and cruder.
It just strikes me that you've got a Muppet and you can convey so much emotion through a relatively simple puppet.
Yeah,
where
yeah.
you have to transpose that to an animatronic, which is much more involved, but you're
Yeah.
still trying to get the same emotion out of it. So you've really got to know what you're doing.
It's a shorthand though, everything has to be clean and direct, and so it is much like animation, you know, where you're trying to hit a pose and sort of communicate with as little as possible. You know, less is more, so you don't want a bunch of noise and you want kind of clarity, and that's how I approached the Nien Nunb character that I did in The Return of the Jedi. He's the opposite of a Star Wars creature in a way. He was just animation really. He was a puppet. He just went sort of from pose to pose. And you can sort of see that when you watch the film in a way. He's an anti-creature, I think.
Yeah. We spoke before many years ago about the origins of Nien Nunb's name as well, which is quite a nice story.
Yeah, so nobody knows how to say his name because it was never mentioned in the films. So you got people like J.J. Abrams calling him Nien Nunb and guys. So, but it is actually pronounced Nien Nunb, like number 9, because he was number 9 on the creature list before he became a featured character. So that's how that works. So it's just Nien Nunb. And you actually hear his name mentioned in the ride, in the Rise of the Resistance ride in California and Florida.
Yeah.
So finally he gets his name mentioned. Yay! And he took 40 years.
So coming from Muppets, which is a cultural mega hit,
Yeah.
coming from Dark Crystal, which is really breaking some new ground, but going into Star Wars, which is established, was there? I mean, it's different for you guys because you're professionals, you know what you're doing. But was there a pressure because you'd had Star Wars been huge, you'd had Empire been huge, and now Jedi's wrapping it all up?
Yeah, a lot of pressure. Very exciting. There still is to this day, you know. Even on the last movie, in Rise of Skywalker, we came back and did some pickups and reshoots and things at the end. And, you know, Anthony Daniels was there with 3DO and a lot of the principal actors. And then they come to your close-up, you know, and you know you have like a couple of minutes, a few takes at best, and you think, okay, whatever I do now is going to be probably in the film, and it'll be seen for centuries and by millions long after I'm gone. And boy, that focuses the mind. You think, okay, I've got to get this right, you know. But it's a lot of pressure, even after all these years, you know. You think, my goodness, this is really important. You know, all the Star Wars is on you at that moment in time, and you want to do your best work, you know.
What was that like when you got the call to come back for the sequels after all those years?
Oh, for the Force Awakens, I was waiting for it. So, you know, I knew that the stuff was happening, and I figured, well, surely our guys are still around, you know, it should be seen somewhere. So I actually, a friend of mine, he's a pop guy called Thomas Dolby, who did She Blinded Science. So we worked together on a few things and over the years, and he's friends with J.J. Abrams. So I built this little web page that explained who I was and what I could offer on the film and all this kind of thing. And I said, hey Thomas, could you just send this to JJ? And the next day, like, done, you know. 2 weeks later, I got a call. So I think they were going to call people like Tim Rose and I anyway, you know. Whether I assume that came from JJ and possibly Kathy Kennedy as well, maybe. So it might have happened anyway, but it's like, I want to make sure, you know. And there's a lesson there, you know, be proactive, I think, and go out and get what you want, you know.
It feels like JJ wanted to tally things up as much with Jedi as possible, the same light setup, all that sort of stuff. So to bring you guys back, who were still in the profession.
And they didn't have to. They could have used, you know, younger, cheaper people or so. Well, no, it's probably not younger yet, cheaper now. But it was really nice of them to do that. And the original voices too, as well, for Akbar and my character. Really great. Really fun for the fans and fun for us.
Now, something that people may not know, because I've been to a couple of events where I've seen you on stage, you quite like to get up and be a vocalist. I've seen you perform Rebel Yell.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. Yes.
Sorry about that.
It's okay, no, don't worry.
It was fantastic. And more recently, Celebration, where you got up there and you did Fraggle Rock.
Yeah, that
which
was
incredible.
fun. And Labyrinth, the Labyrinth song. That was kind of fun, actually. Those guys are great. So yes. My goodness. Yeah, I do like to do that as well.
We actually went for dinner last night with Mark from Ash, didn't we? So
there you are, big Star Wars fans. Yes, it's just nice to do multiple things as a creator, of course, and they're all part of performing and expressing yourself, whether it's vocalizing or doing voiceovers or acting or whatever, you know. Yeah.
You say about variety. Animation. I was going to that. Yeah. You worked on Attack of the Clones in a very different capacity.
Yeah, so when Toy Story came out, I thought, oh, this is kind of like the new Muppets. These are like characters that you really care about and in a great story. So I got recruited by Pixar to work on Toy Story 2 and A Bug's Life. So I worked on a lot of the Woody's Roundup animation scene there with the 50s TV puppet show. And then went to ILM after that to do Attack of the Clones for 6 months, and then I spent 6 months on Jurassic Park 3 animating dinosaurs. So, but again, there are ways of bringing something to life. So animation and puppetry are very, very similar. So my puppetry helped my animation. Then when I went back to puppetry again after that, I was so surprised at how much my animation really helped my puppetry again. So it's a great thing, definitely. I recommend it. You should do that.
Oh, I should try it. Yeah, I should change your tack. It just shows me, you say about doing Jurassic, obviously, and Attack of the Clones, and what you've done coming from the puppetry world.
Yeah.
And Phil Tippett, for example, from the stop motion world.
Absolutely,
in different directions. Do you think all those eyes, they've got to be so useful to bringing a creature to life, especially something that's not human, to convey that emotion?
Yeah, definitely. Well, we were like with Phil, he went back to the old stop motion stuff that he grew up with, with the Ray Harryhausen and earlier. But it all informs what we do. Everything feeds into everything, basically. And it's like, you can't not be affected by what you see, I mean, I love like the old Warner Brothers cartoons, so I love that kind of humor, or old Laurel and Hardy films. So I always inject some of that stuff into what I do as well.
Yeah.
So we all love what each other do, and we're all affected by that.
So, bringing it right up to date, what have you been working on recently?
So, we got, because we're almost done with Acolyte. I did some characters in Acolyte, some lip sync and on-set voices and things like that.
Yeah.
We have Andor 2 coming out next year, so more creature performer stuff. And Beetlejuice 2, got some stuff in there coming out in September. Some great classic original Tim Burton stuff, old school, amazing. And also a lesser known thing called Starmaker with Matt Smith and Morgan Clark, which is it's set in the 70s, shot in Yorkshire. It's like a supernatural horror film. I think BFI, BBC funded. So that'll be out also around the same time in September, I think. So there's been a lot going on.
There is a lot going on.
It's amazing.
Just another question.
You'd think I was better by now, wouldn't you?
I'm going to put some questions out to the audience, so if you've got any questions, put your hands up and get thinking. But before then, I'm just curious, when you started out in puppetry all those years ago, and you start soaking it up from these masters who've done such great work, the technology that you got then, compared to the technology you've got now, you're still trying to convey the same emotions and show us the same things. Do you prefer the options you've got now, or do you prefer the relative simplicity that you had then? What do you think was more involving for you?
Ideally the best of both worlds, so like the old school stuff, we basically, your hand was inside the puppet mostly. Jim Henson tried to make sure of that. He said that's where the soul was. But then we'd have the Muppets didn't really have hardly any mechanisms. You might have the odd eyelid something, but that was it. But then when we went to Dark Crystal, we supplemented that hand puppetry with cable controls. Everything was on like bicycle brake cables for eyebrows and blinks and that kind of thing, and sneers. Now when you can perform your own eyes at the same time, then that's even better still, because when you're going to turn the heads, you can turn the eyes just before and do a blink. And that's my favorite thing, when I get to control my own face with my other hand. So that's kind of rare, but that's like the perfect situation. But it used to take 3 or 4 puppeteers to do like a face on an animatronic character to help us. So it took a lot of rehearsal, like Sir Didymus in Labyrinth. That was 4 of us working on that one character. But now, like with the new animatronics for Lucasfilm, it's all radio controlled. We have these wonderful little micro servos, and they're high speed, and they're super sensitive, and things can be fed through a program to where you can mix expressions and things. So now you can do a whole face on a creature with 1, sometimes 2 people if you want to split the eyes and brows on someone else and focus on the lip sync, or you can do the whole thing yourself. And it's a lot a lot simpler, I guess, in many ways. You can do a lot more subtle expressions now because you can mix things together. So you can scrunch your face up and everything goes together at the same time. You know, it's wonderful, really. So we're in a good place. Otherwise, the materials are kind of the same. You know, the foams that they use on the faces is all the same from the 70s and 80s. So yeah, it's great. It's a wonderful time there. Everything. I will say this though, and this is a question I get a lot at the table and at shows. You know, CG was a thing for a while, and we never quite lost puppetry and animatronics, but I knew there'd be a swing back, and it's definitely come back now. Audiences want the real thing. Producers and directors understand that when they shoot something in camera, they've got it, that's it, you know. And that's where it's gone now with what we're shooting. The last several years, everything I've done has been practical and hasn't been enhanced with CG in any way. Sometimes you look at things saying, oh, that's all CG, or they put a CG face on that, or they changed it. I'd say 99.9% of the time it's all what we've got in camera, and people assume it's CG. So it's a wonderful time again now to be a puppeteer. So you should all become puppeteers, I think, and get lots of jobs. Except for you over there. Yeah, you clearly need to, you know, keep working on the. Oh.
You learn those ventriloquism skills very well. One more thing before we put it to the audience. What you just said has just really made me think of another question. You were there very early days with animatronics.
Yeah.
You were there involved with the Pixar stuff, and that's very early days with animation.
It was indeed.
And now we've got this kind of hybrid of all the things. So what do you think the next thing is going to come along that's going to like kickstart the next level of, you know, next generation of puppetry, of animatronics? What do you think it might be?
Well, it could be. I have a plan for something.
Right.
I have a plan for a hybrid animation puppetry thing that I want to do. So.
But it's copyrighted, you can't talk about it on stage.
Well, I had to do a proof of concept first. But there are things that haven't been done yet, which is exciting. You know, there are materials we haven't used and techniques we've not really brought together yet. And it's something that Jim Henson was always really interested in doing. He was always looking ahead. You know, he loved the technology. Back when we were building on Dark Crystals, I'm talking about 1980. He envisioned a show where puppeteers could puppeteer their own CG characters. It was like, what are you talking about? What is this CG thing? You know, the tech wasn't there yet. But by about 1986, he had the very first thing called Waldo that Steve Whitmire performed.
Yeah.
So you know, he loved that stuff. So
Watch this space.
So yeah, I mean, there are things that haven't been done yet, and I'm excited for that. So it's a great time to be alive and to be a performer, honestly.
Absolutely.
And we're all digital now, yay!
We're all in the Matrix, but don't tell anyone. Does anybody, you got the chance to ask Mike Quinn a question, come on.
Must be.
Anybody got a question?
What's my favourite colour? Or what do I like to eat? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. What do you think?
when was the last time I used a bus?
Here we go.
There we go.
Best question.
What?
I'm just curious, with Labyrinth or Dark Crystal, which one was your favourite to work on?
Oh, okay, that's good question. I think Dark Crystal for me because I was there from a lot earlier on in many ways, and I was, I guess, a bit more involved perhaps because I was also a builder on Dark Crystal too. So when we were shooting Muppet Caper, the days I wasn't on set, I'd be at the Hampstead workshop building the Podlings under Bobby Payne, who was he went to school with Jim Henson, so Bobby worked on Sam and Friends in the old 50s show. So I learned a lot about puppetry techniques and was around the build of the Dark Crystal the whole time as well, and we were doing film tests for it in the evenings and things. So that was a very exciting time. It was the genesis of animatronic creatures, basically. So I think just because of that alone, and then they happened to give me a Skeksis, which was insane, my own character. On Labyrinth, I was more a utility person, I suppose. I would do radio controls for different characters and lots of goblins and things like that. But Jim did love directing Labyrinth, I will say that. He was like a kid in a toy shop. He just loved coming to work every day, and he was just the happiest ever. I think Labyrinth, in a way, was his answer to Dark Crystal. So he needed to, I guess, pick up the pace, bring in some humor, humans, music. So I think that was only 4 years later, but it's such a different film to Dark Crystal. So they're very different, but I'm really pleased that people still care about them right now after all this time. They kind of come back around, and I keep saying I wish Jim were here to see that, because I think he would have loved that. You know, it's a shame really you can't see it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but they all have a special place, you know, and lots of memories for me. Definitely.
You say that building.
Yeah.
As a puppeteer, there's obviously, I'm assuming, there's little quirks and foibles that you like to iron out before you get into it, especially with the more intricate stuff. Is it useful being able to be handy enough to help build these things?
Yeah, actually, yeah. If you're a performer, then you know how to build things. Sometimes there are puppets that are made by people that don't know how to perform. So they might not have the right pivots, or they might be too stiff or too heavy. So it's handy to do both, though. I like to do it, to design and build and perform and edit, direct, write. I guess I'm just a control freak.
Do the catering.
Especially the catering.
Oh yeah, it's important.
Yeah, it's very important.
We've got time for one more question. Here we go.
Here we go. Good. This is going to be so good. No pressure.
I'm fine with that. My question is around Nien Nunb, one of my favourite Star Wars characters. Probably because of the action figure was just so amazing at the time. You came back for The Force Awakens. What happened between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens for Nien Nunb? Or do we got to wait for Nien Nunb, a Star Wars story or something coming soon?
Well, Nien Nunb, he opened a bar, a space bar. It was sort of rum drinks and things like that. So he loves rum. He did that for a few decades, you know, and then he sort of came out of retirement to help the resistance, basically.
Probably a bit of puppetry on the side as well.
He didn't have any kids though, so he couldn't pass that on to them. But yeah, he had a bar for a while, and that's what explains why he put on a bit of weight, you know, in between. In the 30 years in between, he lost some height as well. I don't know what happened there, but yeah, I think that's the movie we need to see. You know, is Space Bar, definitely.
So right to Lucasfilm, we want Nien Nunb, a Star Wars story.
Now you know the plot. And the older I get, the more I look like him, which is really sad. Like owners look like their dogs. I look like my alien.
We couldn't possibly go with mine.
It's terrible, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
It must be the sagging and cheeks. So anyway, wonderful stuff. Yeah, awesome.
It's been brilliant. Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Mike.
May the force be with you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Right, take care.
Turned it off for you.